My name is Celeste Hartwood. I'm 34 years old, and I have spent the better part of the last decade learning the difference between being loved and being useful. Those two things can look identical from across a dinner table, especially when the candles are low and the wine is expensive and 14 members of your family are smiling at you like you just walked into a surprise party. Which, in a way, I had. Except the surprise wasn't for me. I'm a senior procurement analyst for a mid-size hospitality group. I negotiate supplier contracts, manage vendor relationships, and review financial statements the way other people review their grocery lists. Numbers are not abstract to me. They are a language I have spoken fluently since I was old enough to notice that the numbers in my family's house never quite added up. The invitation came on a Wednesday afternoon in March. My mother's name on my phone screen, which was already unusual, because Patricia Hartwood did not call. She texted. She forwarded chain emails with Bible verses and recipe links. She did not call unless something had gone wrong or something needed paying. I answered. Her voice was warm in that specific way it gets when she has practiced being warm. A little too measured. A little too measured. A little too round at the edges. She said she and my father had been talking, that the distance between us had gone on long enough. That family was supposed to be a shelter, not a scoreboard, and they were ready to sit down together and start over. Just the four of us, she said. You, me, your father, and Renee. Dinner at Claridge's Grille on Saturday. A fresh beginning. I want to tell you that I hesitated. I want to tell you that the part of me that had spent 2 years in therapy learning to recognize these patterns spoke up clearly and said, don't go. But the other part, the part that is still 11 years old and setting the table for a family that barely noticed, said, maybe this time. I told her yes. I should have asked one question first. One single question that would have told me everything I needed to know before I put on my coat and drove 45 minutes across town to a restaurant where the bread service alone cost $12 a person. I should have asked, who else is coming? I didn't ask, and that omission cost me exactly nothing, as it turned out. But it could have cost me everything. The difference between those two outcomes came down to a waiter named Owen, a floor manager named Marcus, and the two quietest sentences I have ever spoken in a professional setting. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you who I was before I became the family's financial emergency exit. Because that's the version of me they were counting on. And that version had been gone for a long time. I grew up the older of 2 daughters in a household where money was always somewhere between tight and terrifying. My father, Gerald, worked in commercial roofing. Good years were good, bad years were bad. The difference between them was often the weather. My mother worked part-time at a dental office until I was 12, then stopped when Renee needed what everyone described as more support at home, which was a phrase that contained multitudes and none of them had my name in them. I figured out early that capability was not neutral in my family. It was currency. If you could do something, you were expected to do it. If you were responsible, responsibility found you. I was the child who got good grades and didn't make noise about it. I was the one who read the fine print on the lease when my parents moved into a smaller apartment. I was the one who called the insurance company, filled out the financial aid forms, researched the refinancing options. Nobody asked me to. I just did it because it was there and it needed doing, and I was apparently the person who noticed things that needed doing. By the time I was 19 and working 2 part-time jobs alongside my first year of college, the pattern had calcified into something I couldn't name but could feel in my chest every time my phone rang with a number I recognized. It was never a social call. My father needed a character reference letter for a new contract or bond. My mother needed someone to dispute a medical billing error. Renee needed help with a deposit on an apartment she hadn't properly vetted. My cousin needed a cosigner on a car loan. My aunt needed someone to explain what a variable interest rate was and why her mortgage payment had changed. I helped every time. Not because I was naive, because I had been taught in the particular wordless way that families teach their children things, that my value in the room was proportional to my usefulness. And I had believed it for so long that it felt like a fact about the world rather than a story I had been handed. The break, when it came, was over money. It usually is. 3 years before that Wednesday phone call, my sister Renee decided she wanted to open a boutique event planning business. Not based on experience in the industry. Not based on a business plan or a client list or any operational structure I could identify. Based on the fact that she had organized her own wedding beautifully and several guests had told her she should do it professionally. She needed startup capital. $35,000. My mother called to discuss it. My father sat in the background, audible in that way where you can hear someone not talking loudly enough for their silence to be deniable. The ask was framed carefully, not as a loan exactly, more as an investment. In the family, in Renee's future, in the kind of thing a person does when they love their family. I said I needed to understand the financial structure before I could commit to anything. That sentence was apparently a declaration of war. My mother's voice shifted. My father took the phone. What followed was a conversation I've replayed many times in the years since, not because I'm proud of my part in it, but because it was the first time I said no without immediately apologizing for it. My father told me I was cold, that I'd always been cold, that I cared more about protecting my own interests than about supporting my own sister. He said that if this was how I intended to behave, then they didn't need my support at all, in any form, for anything. I said I understood. He said that if I walked away from this, I was walking away from the family. I said I hoped that wasn't true, but I still couldn't sign something I hadn't reviewed. He hung up. Renee sent me a text that read simply, "I hope it was worth it." For the next 2 years and 9 months, I existed at the edges of my family's life, not fully cut off. There were group texts I was technically included in, holiday invitations that arrived late and always seemed to conflict with something, a sense of being present in name only, like a piece of furniture everyone has agreed not to sit on. My colleague Fiona told me, over lunch one afternoon, that what I was describing sounded less like a family dispute and more like a structured consequence. Like I had been placed on probation for failing to fund something, and the terms of my reinstatement had never been made explicit. She was right, she usually was. Dr. Reeves, my therapist, has this phrase she uses when we discuss my family patterns. She calls it the receiver position. It means the person in the family system who is expected to absorb whatever the system cannot carry, the emotional weather, the financial shortfall, the logistical complexity. The one who holds the bag, not because they volunteered, but because everyone else stepped back, and the bag had to go somewhere. I had been in the receiver position since childhood, and I had mistaken the weight of the bag for a sign that I was indispensable. What I was actually carrying, she helped me understand, was not love. It was other people's discomfort with consequences. Every bill I had paid, every form I had filled out, every uncomfortable conversation I had managed on someone else's behalf, had not brought me closer to my family. It had simply taught them that discomfort was temporary, because Celeste would eventually arrive and absorb it. The morning my mother called with a dinner invitation, I had been in therapy for 22 months. I was not healed. That is not how it works, but I was clearer. And clear was more useful than healed in practice, because clear meant I could see what was in front of me with something approaching accuracy. I accepted the invitation because I wanted to know if anything had changed, not because I expected it had, because I needed to see it for myself. There is a version of closure that doesn't come from a conversation. It comes from watching something happen exactly the way you knew it would and finally letting that be enough. I told Fiona I was going. She gave me a look I recognized from quarterly budget reviews. The look of someone who already knows what the numbers say and is watching you find out. I told her I'd be fine. Claridge's Grille is the kind of restaurant that exists to make the person paying feel slightly anxious about the bill and the person not paying feel entirely comfortable. White tablecloths. Leather-bound menus. A wine list that begins at $60 and ascends without apology. I arrived at 7:15, exactly when I'd said I would. I dressed the way I dress for board presentations. Quietly professional. Nothing that announces itself. The parking lot told me something was wrong before I reached the door. My father's truck. My mother's sedan. Renee's car. My Uncle Frank's SUV. My Aunt Carol's wagon, 3 cars I recognized as belonging to cousins. 2. I didn't recognize it all. I sat in my car for 90 seconds and counted. Just the 4 of us, my mother had said. I counted 9 vehicles. I read the note card I had written to myself that morning and tucked under my sun visor. It said, You are not required to fix anything tonight. You are only required to see clearly. I got out of the car. The hostess inside was managing the particular professional calm of someone whose evening has already been more complicated than she expected. She looked at me, looked at her screen, and said the table was ready. She led me toward the private dining room at the back, and I could hear my family before I turned the corner. The particular acoustic signature of my family at a restaurant, my uncle's laugh, my Aunt Carol's commentary on something. The layered sound of overlapping conversations among people who have been eating and drinking for a while. I turned the corner. 14 people around a long rectangular table. Every seat filled except one, at the far end, directly across from my father. The table was covered in the aftermath of serious ordering. Seafood towers. A carved prime rib station the restaurant must have set up as a special arrangement. 2 empty wine bottles already upended in ice buckets, a third being poured. Appetizer plates stacked to the side, half cleared by someone who had been working hard to keep up. They had been here for over an hour. My mother stood up the moment she saw me. Her arms opened. Her face arranged itself into the expression I had been looking at since childhood. Warm. Relieved. As if I had arrived at a celebration rather than walked into something that had been engineered without my knowledge. I sat down. What else do you do when 14 people are watching and the chair has been held for you with a particular deliberateness that makes not sitting feel like a statement? I sat down and I smiled and I ordered sparkling water, which is what I always order in professional settings where I need to stay sharp. And which is what I had been ordering at family meals for 6 years because I had learned, the slow way, not to soften my own edges, at a table where other people wanted them soft. The waiter's name was Owen. He was perhaps 22, moved with the control deficiency of someone still learning how to carry the full weight of a demanding section, and he refilled my water without being asked every single time. I noticed that, the automatic attentiveness of someone who has been trained well and takes it seriously. The comments started with the appetizers. My Uncle Frank leaned across the table and said he'd heard I'd gotten another promotion. His voice had that particular texture of a compliment being used as a measuring tool. Impressive, he said. Really impressive. For someone who got started the way you did. My Aunt Carol said she admired how independent I'd turned out, that some people in the family had needed more support along the way, and it was nice that I had always been so self-sufficient. She said it looking at Renee, and then looking at me, with the connective tissue of the glance doing the work. The sentence was too subtle to do directly. My cousin Garrett said it must be nice to not have to worry about money. Each of these observations landed with a precision that did not feel accidental. They were not exactly coordinated, but they were aligned in the way that things align when people have been having a version of the same conversation for a long time and have arrived at a shared understanding of the shape of it. The shape was this. Celeste has. The rest of us have less. This is an occasion. I watched my father at the head of the table. He was performing ease in a way I had seen before. Too relaxed. Too expansive in his gestures. He waved his hand when he ordered another round and said, "We're celebrating tonight," in a voice projected for the room rather than the waiter. He had put a card down when they arrived. I knew this because the hostess had mentioned it when she seated me. Parties of that size required a card on file. Standard policy. His card was being held. And yet, my father had not ordered this way at a restaurant in my living memory. He was a man who read every line of a bill before he paid it. A man who had argued a $3 discrepancy on a takeout order with a patience that outlasted the restaurant's willingness to engage. The ease with which he was ordering now was a costume, and it fit him the way costumes fit people who aren't used to wearing them. I filed this. The way I file everything that doesn't add up. There's a moment in every family gathering where the thing everyone has been avoiding arrives at the table. It's rarely loud. Families like mine are too practiced for loud. It tends to arrive in the middle of something else. A lull in conversation, the clearing of a dessert plate, a beat of quiet that someone decides to fill. My sister Renee filled it. She was on her 3rd glass of wine, and the filter that 3 glasses of wine removes had been, in Renee's case, never especially thick to begin with. She leaned toward me across the table and said, with the casual confidence of someone stating a fact already agreed upon in a meeting I hadn't been invited to, "You're getting this, right? We figured you'd want to." The table went quiet in that elastic way where sound doesn't actually stop but the texture of it changes completely. I set my water glass down. "Getting what?" I said. Renee blinked. Recalibrated. Smiled the smile of someone who has said the line too early and is now improvising. "Dinner. You know, since you're doing so well. It just made sense. It just made sense." I looked at my mother. She was looking at the centerpiece. I looked at my father. He was looking at me with the expression of a man who has committed to a plan and is hoping the plan survives contact with reality. I looked at Owen standing at the service station, who was maintaining the professional neutrality of someone watching a situation develop that has nothing to do with him, and everything to do with the table he is responsible for. I excused myself to the restroom. The restroom at Claridge's Grille is the kind of restroom designed to make you feel better than you do. Marble counters. Good lighting. The quiet of a room that has been insulated from whatever is happening on the other side of the door. I ran cold water over my wrists. A grounding technique Dr. Reeves had taught me for moments when my nervous system was running faster than my thinking. My sister's bag was on the counter. She'd come in before me and left it. Renee had always left things everywhere. It was one of the few things about her that had never changed. Her phone was inside, screen lit. I want to be precise about what happened next because the precision matters. I did not go through her phone. The screen was already illuminated. The notification visible without unlocking? A group message thread. The preview text was 4 words. "She never says no." I stood there for a moment. Then I picked up the phone. I am not proud of what I did next, but I am also not going to pretend I would do it differently. The phone was already lit, the thread was already open. And I had spent 34 years paying for things I hadn't ordered based on information I had never been given. The scales of information asymmetry in my family had not been balanced in my favor for a single day of my adult life. I read the thread. It was called Family Saturday. 6 members. My parents, Renee. My Aunt Carol. My Uncle Frank. My cousin Garrett. The messages went back 3 weeks. My mother had coordinated the guest list with the efficiency of someone planning a corporate event. RSVPs confirmed. Dietary preferences noted. Parking logistics handled. The restaurant selected specifically, I read, because it was the kind of place Celeste would feel too embarrassed to make a scene in. My father had written, in a message sent 10 days earlier. "She'll cover it. She's not going to let us sit there with a declined card in front of everyone." Renee had replied, "Especially if we order before she gets there. Once it's on the table, it's already done." My mother, 8 days before the dinner. The refinancing fell through again. "We need to get ahead of this before summer. Saturday is the right moment." My Aunt Carol, "Should we say anything about the amount?" My mother, "No. Let Gerald ask at the end. She responds to him more than she responds to me. And make sure everyone thanks her in advance, it helps." I read the thread twice. Not because I needed to confirm what I was reading, because I wanted to understand the full shape of it before I walked back out. I set the phone down exactly where I found it. Screen down. I washed my hands. I looked in the mirror at the person looking back. Then I straightened my collar, because I'm the kind of person who straightens her collar when she's about to do something difficult, and I walked out. I did not go back to the table immediately. I went to the service station. Owen was there, stacking menus with the focused efficiency of someone who has 10 other things to do and is doing this one first. A man in a black shirt with an earpiece stood beside him reviewing something on a tablet. His name tag said Marcus, floor manager. He had the particular stillness of someone who has been doing this long enough to stay calm through anything. I approached them. I kept my voice low, not dramatic. The register you use when you're passing along operational information in a professional setting, and you don't need the floor to hear it. I said, "I need to make a small adjustment to the check for this table. I'll be settling separately." Marcus looked up, patient, professional. "I won't be covering the table's bill tonight," I said. "The reservation is under Gerald Hartwood. His card is already on file. Please present the full check to him when the table is ready to close out. And if you could separate out my sparkling water onto a standalone check, I'd like to settle that before I sit back down." Marcus held eye contact for a moment. Not suspicious. Reading. Of course, he said. One more thing. I looked at Owen. Add 25% to my check for the service team. You've been running a 14 top alone and you haven't missed a single water refill. That kind of attention deserves to be acknowledged. Owen looked startled in the way people look startled when they are recognized for something they didn't expect anyone to notice. I settled my check at the station. 1 sparkling water and 2 refills. Plus the gratuity. Marcus handed me the receipt and said, quietly, "We'll present the table check in about 15 minutes. I said thank you. I walked back to my seat. Those 15 minutes were the clearest I had felt at a family event in years. I sat at my end of the table and I listened. My uncle told a long story about a property dispute with a neighbor that had no resolution and wasn't going to get one. My Aunt Carol admired the centerpiece. Renee took a photograph of her dessert. My mother refilled her own wine glass and laughed at something my father said. My father, I noticed, kept checking his watch. A small, tight movement. The posture of a man managing a timeline. He waited until the dessert plates were mostly cleared. Until the table had reached that particular satiation that comes after a long, expensive meal, and makes people soft and slow and grateful. Then he folded his hands on the edge of the table, looked at me across the full length of it and said what I already knew he was going to say. He had the expression of a man delivering a fair verdict. "Celeste, this has been wonderful. You'll handle the bill." He said it as a statement. Not a question. A confirmation of something already decided. "It's the least you can do. After everything," my mother added from the side. Gentle. Reinforcing. 14 people looked at me. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip. "I've already taken care of my portion," I said. A pause. My father's hands stayed folded. "Your waiter will bring the check to you," I said. "Your card is on file." My mother's face changed. My father's composure held for 3 more seconds. My Aunt Carol looked at my Uncle Frank with an expression that contained volumes. And then Owen arrived. He placed the check presenter on the table directly in front of my father, with the particular care of someone who has been given clear instructions and is following them precisely. He set it down, straightened, and said, "Whenever you're ready, sir." My father opened it. He had to open it, because 14 people were watching, and not opening it would have been its own answer. I watched him read the total. He was good at not reacting. I will give him that. Decades of pride will teach a person to control their face in situations their face wants very badly to respond to. He handed his card to Owen without looking at it. The gesture of a man who had decided the card would work and preferred not to examine the alternative. Owen returned in 4 minutes. He leaned down beside my father's chair. Low enough for discretion. Not low enough for privacy. "I'm sorry, sir. There's been a decline on this card. Would you like me to try it again, or would you prefer to try a different method of payment?" My father said to run it again. Owen returned. Same result. My father reached into his wallet. 2 more cards. He handed them both. A hedge that told the table more than any sentence could have. Owen went through both. Neither cleared. He returned to my father's side a final time. He spoke quietly. My father nodded once, jaw tight. Then he looked up at the table. The table, to its credit, did not perform surprise very convincingly. My Aunt Carol found her water glass deeply interesting. My cousin Garrett studied the dessert menu. Renee had gone very still in the way people go still when a plan they were part of is visibly not working. My father looked at me. His voice, when it came, had the sound of something that has been under pressure for a long time and has finally been allowed to release. Not anger. Something rawer and harder to witness than anger. "Celeste," he said. "Please." I looked at him, not coldly. As clearly as I could. "I'm sorry you're in a difficult position, Dad. I genuinely am. But you did not invite me here to make amends. You invited me here to make a payment. You invited me here to make a payment. And I read enough tonight to understand how thoroughly that was planned." My mother started to speak. "I read the thread," I said. "On Renee's phone, in the restroom." The table absorbed this. Renee's face confirmed what I'd said more clearly than any response could have. If you and Mom are having financial trouble that is real and serious, I want to help you address it. But I will do that in a room with a financial counselor and a clear accounting of what is actually needed and what a realistic plan looks like, not like this. I looked at the table. The demolished, see-through tower. The empty wine bottles. Not ordered before I arrived to make it irreversible. I stood up. I looked at my mother, who was crying the way she cried when she wanted the room's sympathy, rather than her own answer to something. You used to say that family takes care of family, I said. I believed that for a long time. I think what I've understood, slowly, is that the sentence was always missing a subject. You meant I take care of family. And I did, for years, because I thought that was how I earned my place in it. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. My place doesn't have a price. It never should have. I walked out through the dining room, past the host stand, through the heavy front doors, into the parking lot where the air was cool and the evening had gone quiet. I sat in my car for a while with the engine off. I didn't feel triumphant. That's the thing nobody tells you about these moments. You don't feel triumphant. You feel tired in a specific way that has the quality of something that has been carrying weight for a very long time and has finally been set down. Not light, just unencumbered. My phone began accumulating messages. I could see the screen lighting up without reading them. The volume of it told me everything I needed to know about the conversation happening inside. I started the car. I drove home in the same quiet I had driven there, except this quiet was different. It was mine. The aftermath arrived in pieces. My cousin Garrett texted 2 days later to say that, for whatever it was worth, he thought I'd been patient about the whole thing for a very long time. That was the entire text. I saved it. My Aunt Carol called and left a voicemail explaining that things had been mischaracterized and that her intentions had always been to support a family reunion. I did not call back. Renee sent a message 10 days after the dinner. It was the longest message she had ever sent me. It said, in part, that she had told herself for 3 years that I'd rejected the family when I'd rejected the loan cosign, and that sitting at that table and watching what happened had made her reconsider the sequence of events in a way she hadn't been willing to do before. She did not ask for anything in the message. She said she was sorry. I read it 4 times. I did not reply immediately. I took 3 weeks to think about what I wanted to say, and then I said it as honestly as I could. I appreciated her honesty. I was not ready for regular contact. I was open to the possibility that might change. That was all I had to offer right now. She said she understood. My parents took longer. My father called 6 weeks after the dinner. His voice on the voicemail was different from any version of it I had heard before. Not performing ease. Not performing authority. Just a man who was older than he had been, and was running out of room to keep not saying something directly. He said they were working with a credit counselor, that the house would need to go eventually, but that they had found a workable path forward. That he had not handled things the way a father should handle things for a long time, and he was not going to pretend that one phone call resolved any of it. But he wanted me to know they were dealing with it themselves. He said, "You were right to say no. You've been right to say no every time you've said it. I just didn't want to be the one who needed to hear that." I have listened to that voicemail more than I want to admit. I have not called back yet. But the number is still in my phone. That is something. In my family, that is not nothing. What I know now is this. The most expensive thing in my life was never the bills I paid, or the loans I co-signed, or the deposits I quietly covered. The most expensive thing was the belief that I had to keep paying to belong. Belonging is not a subscription. You do not maintain it by clearing balances. You cannot buy your way into a family that has already decided what your role is, because paying the price only confirms the price. The night I walked out of that restaurant, I didn't win anything. I didn't get an apology. I didn't resolve 14 years of pattern in a single dinner. But I did the one thing that had always been available to me and that I had spent years convincing myself I couldn't afford. I stopped. Stopping is not a failure. It is not abandonment. It is not cruelty. It is the recognition that you have been carrying something that was never yours to carry, and the decision to put it down in a way that is honest about what it was. I still think about Owen, the waiter, how he refilled my water every single time without being asked. How he looked startled when I told him his attention had been noticed. How something that small, that basic, that professional, was enough to remind me what it feels like to be in a room where the person serving you is not trying to extract something from you at the same time. Everyone deserves at least one person in their corner who refills the glass. Find yours. Be that for someone else. That is the whole lesson. That's all I've got. Thank you for staying until the end. If you've ever been the person in your family expected to pay, to fix, to absorb, this one was for you. Drop a comment below. Subscribe if these stories reach something in you. And take good care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.